gingar, o Brasil do meu amor, terra de nosso Senhor.
Hello, everyone. Let's get the slides up. Hope you all enjoyed the Bossa Nova song. All right, let's get the slides up. Smash the patriarchy, save the planet. Climate change is a feminist issue. The climate crisis disproportionately affects people in poverty, people in situations of vulnerability and marginalization. And guess who's the majority of the world's poor? Women and girls. At the current rate that we are with gender inequality, it will take us 257 years to close the global gender pay gap in the world. Now, how many countries do you all think that have achieved gender equality? According to the UN Women data, none. We need to achieve gender equality if we want to solve climate justice, and vice versa. This is because women are more vulnerable about climate change, because they are already socially and economically disadvantaged in our society. And climate disasters place an added burden on them, especially women in developing countries, indigenous women, Black and brown women, women from small island states, women in situations of vulnerability. 4 out of every 5 people who are displaced by the climate change are women. But let's be clear, I'm not really here to only talk about the victim side of women and climate, because women are also really powerful stakeholders when it comes to solving climate change. They bring amazing and powerful solutions to the decision-making spaces, to local grassroots work, to mediation, to negotiation, to all types of spaces that are discussing what climate action looks like. The data doesn't really lie. Nations that have higher rates of females as climate leaders have more access to education for girls, have less vulnerability to climate disasters. As we have more women in parliament and Congress and other political decision-making spaces, there's a larger likelihood that we can pass environmentally friendly agreements. So let me just give you a visual of what this looks like. A 10% increase in participation in female parliamentarians or Congress in a country is associated with a 0.24 metric ton decrease in carbon dioxide emissions per capita. So this is the equivalent of the carbon emissions avoided if the average US citizen did not drive a car 587 miles per year. So it's a big impact of having women's leadership in this work. But you may be wondering why. Why is it that when we have more women in power, we have more climate action? I really don't think that it is a coincidence that we call our planet Mother Earth, right? The right to land, sovereignty, and independence is deeply rooted in the defense of women's rights. Demanding control over our land, our forests, is like demanding control over our own bodies, because both women and the environment have been so overly exploited and marginalized by the patriarchal society we live in. The Brookings Institution has stated that women have increased perception of vulnerability to risk due to the roles that they're given in society, the role of caregivers, the role of fetching the water in situations of droughts in developing countries, the role of feeding their family in situations of food insecurity. So of course, caregiving social roles that women have are deeply interlinked with the health of our planet. Unfortunately, however, when we see the outlook for women's meaningful participation and leadership in the global climate space, the global climate negotiations, we're not at all where we should be at. the percentage of women that are in national delegations in the UN climate change conferences, in the COPs, in the other UN negotiations, was at 38% last year in 2021, and only 30% over a decade ago. So a very, very small decrease for all the work that we have been doing in the grassroots feminist movements. And also when it comes to heads of delegation in these COP spaces, the data is that last year we only had 13%. And this increase of 3% in the past over 10 years is just truly not acceptable for what we need to solve climate change. I don't know if everyone here is noticing a trend of what I'm talking about, because despite all of these policy commitments, despite all this tireless action by activists all around the world to promote gender equality in climate policy, the reality just is that women are not at the front lines of these climate leadership, meaningful decision-making spaces. And at the current rates that we are at, gender parity in the national delegations for the climate conferences will not be achieved until 2040. If I'm being honest with you all, we simply cannot afford to wait until 2040 to solve this, to have this gender parity in those spaces where the decisions are being made for us. I speak for myself as a young Brazilian that has dedicated my life since I was 18 to elevate the need for women's leadership, and also for many others in this movement that are tirelessly working for women's leadership in climate. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing to contribute to solve this problem. Let me tell you about Empodera Clima, which is the work that I've been leading for the past couple of years. We are a Brazil-based youth-led initiative that looks to raise awareness about the disproportionate impact of women, especially women in the global south, to climate change, and the very real need of women's leadership in climate action. So through a multilingual database with both original and also curated content on gender and climate action, we look to serve as a resource for those that cannot access this type of content in their native languages, such as Portuguese and Spanish. We also do a lot of global and local advocacy work through partnerships with climate movements around the world for gender-just climate action and intergenerational equity. At its core, Empodera Clima is about empowering young people for climate justice. And through our work, we have come to a very powerful conclusion that I want to share with you for gender and climate justice and for us to fight the climate crisis, which is girls' education. In 2021, climate change impacts prevented 4 million girls from completing their education. And if we continue in the path that we're in, by 2025, in just 3 years, climate change will contribute to prevent at least 12.5 million girls from getting their education, from going to school. There's a source by the Malala Fund that says that closing gender gaps in education can help countries better adapt to the effects of climate change and even decrease the rates of global warming to mitigate climate change. So this is quite impactful when you think about it. What can you do to solve the climate crisis? Girls' education has proven to be a key resource for us to switch that moment of not taking action into something really, really powerful. So if I could go here, continue, great. When girls have access to education, this is what happens. They're able to access and to learn how to have new skills for the green economy, right? So here we're talking about problem-solving skills, decision-making skills, critical thinking. So when young women and girls are in the classroom, what happens is they can develop agency to make their own sound decisions about their lives. And this is some interesting data, which is if every girl could exercise her right to sexual and reproductive health and rights, we could reduce carbon emissions globally by 40% by the end of the century. Yeah, This is really powerful. I think that this really goes to show that when we empower students for climate justice, we can change the scenario. And if we take an approach to education that goes beyond just teaching about climate science, but teaches about justice, teaches about the people-centric view of climate action, we can really change the current scenario. Knowledge is empowerment, and empowerment can really lead to equality if we're looking to really have a greener future ahead of us. So as we leave this conference on climate education, on environmental education, I would encourage you all and ask you all to really go beyond just having quality climate education in schools, in whatever work that it is you're doing, but to really reimagine education for a more gender just future. A gender transformative education that can equip girls with what they need to adapt to the climate crisis can really, really, really be powerful. So climate change is a man-made problem with a feminist solution. And for me, as one of the many, many, many young women that are doing this work for more climate action, I just wanted to leave a message with you all, which is that, as we know, the oceans are rising, but so are we. Thank you so much. Obrigada.
Okay, is this on?